Sorry about that.
No, you're okay. Thank you.
Yep. I'm coming from the western part of the state today, starting a little bit of traveling here in the coming weeks. This is going to be also my last installment of this for this particular conference, and I appreciate Steve and Hannah and the others in helping put this together, carry this off, have all of these wonderful sessions, and keep this kind of rolling through these weeks. I can tell you, I think it's been very helpful to have the opportunity to hear from so many different people, so many different topics, and be able to integrate that experience into what we're looking for in education and moving forward from this point. And that kind of brings us to, I'll get on to this episode with episode 6, looking at, well, kind of what's next for education and for us in education. I think there's more talk now about planning. What do we do, coming up for the summer or the fall semester or next year? How does this impact calendars, families, teaching, training, all of those things? And I think it's a real loaded topic. I mean, just loaded with a lot of things that have to be thought through very carefully. And I've been in situations where I've spoken with individuals who are trying to plan, trying to get ready for opening back up, bringing kids back in, starting college back, doing things like that. And I think there's a lot of unknown, and the frustration is in that unknown. And I think part of what I want to do today is for us to really talk about how can education and how will it change for the future. I'm optimistic, so I'd say maybe for the better for sure. And what can we do to ensure that that's going to be a change for the better? A couple of challenges that sort of jump out at me and can kind of start as a springboard for some of the conversation I want us to have today is this idea of access. Over the weeks when we've had different guests on and we've talked to different people and participants, putting things into the chat there, access is one of those things that continues to come up. And this is just some quick data here from the National Center for Education Statistics. And, you're looking at 14% of the children, essentially K-12, pre-K-12, just not having internet access. Which is a sizable number. And when we look around the globe, of course, I think we would have a little different statistic we would be seeing there. But the discrepancy between access and income, things like that, I mean, there's lots of socioeconomic data that you could take a look at and tie to these things and try to discover a little bit about what's happening out there. This idea of access, I think, is a challenge that we all have to face. How do we ensure that we can continue the learning when access can be sketchy? Where, even if you have 1, 2, 3 learners out of your group who have that difficulty, how are you going to reach them? What sort of strategies have to be in place? What role do we have in helping to provide some of that access? I really feel like one of the lasting changes is that the push and the leap to really provide access is just, it's taking a huge step over these months. What was sort of a very methodical, pace, moving along, trying to continue to improve things with access. I think people have been forced into this, and it's been a big jump, really, in this. Another challenge, and this is kind of been an interesting situation for me, having been involved in a lot of professional development for educators over the years, is looking at this idea of training. And, in my mind, I'm like most people thinking, okay, the teachers need to be able to do A, B, C. So I'm going to spend these weeks training them on A, B, and C. Then they're going to practice A, B, and C, and then they're going to refine it and, over time become better and better at it to where they become proficient. The scenario here has been all of a sudden we're not in school and everybody's having to do this with a wide range of training experience in delivering any kind of remote learning and in technology platforms, things like that. So it's been a bit of the Wild West, I would say, looking at how technology in particular has kind of come into a role here that's been necessary to provide things at a distance. And I think by and large, that can be a good thing. But this idea of training, what do we need to do? There's one article that I placed the title there from the journal, and just these new opportunities and the attention we need to give to what's going on. And coming out of this, after I read that article and a few other things, you know, I think experience is incredibly important when you're teaching remotely and online. This has forced people into, you're going to have some experience. Now, it may be not great, or it may be fantastic, or somewhere there but in between, but that experience is valuable in learning. And so the experience, I think, is started. Then there's this idea of resources. And these have come in various shapes and forms. Early on, you know, people would publish, here's 55 great tools to use online learn. That's just, it's like a flood, you know, drinking from a fire hose there, trying to take all of that in. I think resources and refining this resource list to the ones you really want to leverage within your educational institution for that consistency, for training teachers, the experience on the student end, all of that consistency will help as we start to hone that list down to the ones that we really want to focus on within the organization. And I don't want to forget the third thing listed there, which is that piece of reflection. I truly hope that educators take the time when they're recording lectures, when they're recording their classes, when they're putting these things out there, watch them, reflect on it, think about how you did. Think about what you would change if you were going to do this again. What went really well? What was a real struggle? And that's where that constant improvement with what you're doing can come into play. And that reflection is important. Now, I'll have to admit, I think a lot of people have really not, and including myself, had a lot of time to sit around and think, well, how did that go? Because you've been just preparing for the next one, the next one, the next one because of the situation. Perhaps with the ending of semesters, the ending of school years, and the transition to something new, there is a little pause there perhaps for people to take a few minutes for reflection. And I think that's important, and that's how we can all learn and improve as educators for sure. Again, I'll mention that if you have questions or things, please drop them in the chat. We're going to try and get everybody involved here with just some ideas they have about the future of education and what that's going to look like coming up for us. Third thing here I want to talk about is this idea of balance. You know, working within a school, you can say, okay, let's think about our schedule. How do we want to do this? Well, do we want to let kids come back or not come back right away? Are we going to do partial days? We're going to split them up. A-B days. I mean, there's lots of schedule possibilities. But that's one part of what's going on with people. And this balance between what about the adults in the house and their jobs? What requirements are they facing? Are some going back to work now? Who's there to help them if schools say, nope, they're not coming back, they're staying home? So you've got this incredible balancing act that I think as educators, we've got to keep our eye on the big picture there. The decisions that we're making, how is that impacting those families? Are they able to do what we think is the best idea in the whole wide world? Is that really practical for them in their situation? And I think the key here is flexibility. I think schools are going to have to come back in a way that is going to offer some flexibility to families to be able to do the things that's best for them while still continuing and connecting and receiving that education. That balancing act is going to be something that is quite critical with what we're doing in education in general. So think about that. And I put a few things on there. That balance probably could include 50 things. You know, if you think about situations that people find themselves in, and what does family mean? Is that immediate family? Is that extended family that has to be involved? I mean, there's lots of possibilities there. In these various schools, also, if one decides to go back and others don't, what strain does that put on a family? And I think I've seen some of that potentially coming up as say an elementary or middle school is wanting, they're thinking one thing, high school or higher education's thinking another. And how do you meet that continuum of a variety of different ways people are going to be bringing back education to maybe what the new normal would be? The fourth one I want to mention here is this idea of communication. This again has been a topic we've talked about quite a bit over the weeks here, and the importance of this and trying to communicate with our learners, with the families, with our customers to know how that experience is going, what have we done well, what do we need to do a bit better. And part of this really is refining out our communication. And it's interesting to listen to discussions in organizations and talking about all these ways to communicate different people. And after some discussion, I find that all of them sort of filter down to an idea, you know, we need to come up with a consistent way where they're getting a piece of information. They're not being overwhelmed with too much information, too frequent, too detailed, too lengthy. How can we really streamline this on that experience and for the user? And communication is a key part of that. And I think that that's one area that we need to keep in mind as we're planning for how do we start the new semester, how do we start a new school year, how do we bring people back, how do we offer a blended learning, how do we offer some coming back, some deciding to stay home. That's all going to be driven in terms of a successful first step by that communication piece, crafting that in a way that will really give the information, but not overwhelm people even more. I included a quote there, which is I think, kind of relevant. It does seem like a sort of a dark, no wind tunnel at times that we're in, but I think that we can also turn this into an opportunity to refine things and make things better and improve this experience that students are going to be faced with. And with the families we spoke with last week, it was interesting. I think at least one of the kids really was interested in continuing their education online after this. Just saw the value in that, and it matched their learning style. So what impact does that have as people turn towards more online at any level? What does that mean? So those are some challenges that I think are quite important to go through. The next part of this, and this is kind of the special guest, really is everyone here. And I'd like to field some ideas. I have lots of ideas about these things, but I also think it's great. In the past, the things that came through the chat were real relevant and really great ideas. I'm going to place into the chat their link. You don't need to log in or anything to be able to kind of post what you think with these categories I have. But please make sure before you post that you start with your name, just first name, so that if we want to discuss it, we kind of can know who we're talking to about that. Don't have to put full name, just first name's fine. And you can enter the information, then slide it and put it under these columns. Well, I've got these right now 5 categories. Now these could be seen as starters. We may end up with something a little bit more than that, but I want to talk about how this pandemic will change education today, and then really kind of lasting out into the future, and looking at areas of teaching and an area of learning, roles and responsibilities. How does that shift? And then that delivery and exchange, that also could include that communication, because communication helps facilitate that delivery and exchange of information. And the last one I thought I'd put on there is just like, whoa, you're blowing my mind. I didn't think about that. That's just like this huge thing that would really make a great difference. So if you have any of those, you can throw that under that section. Padlet, again, is a tool. Lots of teachers use this in the classroom. You can engage the kids, and if you set up for an account, then your name is pinned onto the little Post-it note for your ID automatically. But in this case, you don't need to set up that. You could go ahead and just put your first name in there. I'm going to actually switch my feed that I have going on here, and we're going to go to the Padlet screen. And I'm going to give you a quick little tour here. Across the top, and you can scroll through, here are my categories that I placed there. And there is a red, pink, red sort of button that has a plus sign. You can click here and it will actually open a little window, and you can type your idea here, whatever you have, and then you can hit enter and post it. I'm going to delete that away, and you can color code these. You can do lots of things here. Don't use this blue, because that's going to be my category headings. So if we come up with a new heading, I'm going to put it on there and we can slide things around. But you can move your entry anywhere on here that you want to. And it's just a way to get interaction. And actually at the end of this, what I would really like to do is I'm going to post this out on my site, the final, with all these ideas, and to get people to think about this as they start to plan, start to sort of forecast out to what the future is going to look like, you know, a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, a year from now, and what sort of things that we need to keep in mind. If you have something you really need to share, you know, through the listening part here, you know, we can turn on your microphone and you can share out a little bit. Sometimes ideas are a little bit more complicated than, you know, you can put down in 3 or 4 words on a little post-it thing like this. But if you want to elaborate on some of those things, just let me know, and we'll get you dumped in and let you do that. So if you have a minute, and you can go to that link and you can start putting some things in here. I'm going to put a few things in here, and you know, we'll start to just slide your responses kind of under the category where you think they belong, and we'll start to discuss some of these things. And I'm going to give you just about 2 minutes to post a few things, and then we'll start into some discussion. I might slide some of these ideas around if I want to put them, if I feel like they go into a cat. If you think they need to go somewhere else, just drag them where you think, because I just want to try and make it clear where we want to place these.
Sorry,
Okay, we're getting some great ideas here, and please keep on adding some things as we go along. And a few of you who couldn't get it to work the way it's supposed to, if you put a question in the chat, I'll just copy it and paste it in there and drop it under a category. And if something needs to be changed, just let me know. And so I'm kind of navigating around here a little bit. And the nice thing about Padlet is, you know, you can keep on getting more and more space as you get ideas. So we can, you know, increase the area here and scroll around just a bit. This couple things in the teaching category. And there was one, I drew this from, let me go back here, from Chuck, about how teachers can scaffold and tier for online learning. I think this is going to be a fundamental piece of what some of the training has to be for teachers is, yeah, you can take a lesson and drop it in line, but, you know, to an online format, but what about the different levels of learners you have and options? And I think doing some scaffolding and doing some choices. I mean, there's some great strategies out there in teaching where you can choose from different categories, different things to complete with a particular topic, you know, kind of geared towards some of your strengths. So I think that is something where the scaffolding is very important there. And let's see, I'm going to drop in a couple more here and drop them in. Yes. Drop that on that side there. And let's see. Oh yeah, the focus on pedagogy and versus technology. That's all, you know, being a technology person. I mean, in my background, a lot of people think, well, you know, I just don't want to use technology to use it. I said, that's exactly right. I think we need to look where technology can help us in reaching our students in a variety of ways that we want to help them learn. And to say, you know, it would be like me saying, okay, all of you need to use Padlet starting tomorrow. Well, that may make no sense at all to some people. I mean, this may be completely a useless tool in your situation and not really be applicable. So I think you have to really look at the situation and think about how that that can change. Let's see, collaborate with colleagues. I think that's right. There's going to have to be a new sense of communication there. And how do you facilitate that? Museum educators, that's interesting. Erica posted that. You know, these virtual museum visits, and I was just thinking back the last time I was teaching in my AP Human Geography class, we used to go to a museum in this county museum in Eastern North Carolina, and I'm thinking, wow, that experience, how could you package that? What could you do working with those people at that museum to still offer that experience, even though they couldn't be there in person? That's a great thought there. That could be interesting. And let's see, teachers have to use more digital tools than before to motivate students. Yes, I think there's going to have to be some digital literacy here going on the teacher's part. That's part of that professional development, I think. Yeah, Stacy mentioned one thing, and I put this, there was another one about a central, easy to find portal for parents and students. Up under, let's see, where did I put a delivery and exchange? I posted something about learning management systems. I've listened to some conversations, and some schools are like, well, we want to use just this, we're going to use this or use that. If you start looking at dynamic learning management systems, many times these can incorporate everything all into one. And I'm not a salesperson. I'm not trying to sell people on learning management systems. And my experience, I've managed with, you know, thousands of students and hundreds of educators in Canvas by Instructure. And so part of the goal there with that was for us to be able to put a lot of things in one location, communication in that location, third-party tools, you know, things like Padlet or other things that we could integrate straight with the learning management system, so our learners go nowhere else for the most part. We can put everything there, and that was really to facilitate that user experience in a way and get them one location to go to and not having to go to 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's, you know, just to streamline that just a bit. So I think that's important to look at that. And let's go look at the learning category here. there's a couple of things here about how can community literacy, community education be enhanced while families are home together. There's a lot of possibilities here, I think, for families and some of that family learning to really be enhanced here, and kind of getting involved in that experience as a group rather than you're doing your schoolwork and that's separate from everything else we do. That blending of that into the regular sort of day-to-day family experience might be changed, forever. And I think that's a positive for sure. And community school model be implemented during learning at home. There's a whole social part of this that's a challenge for sure. I think we need to look at that very carefully and think about how do we really still maintain that sense of community, have that community school being such an integral part that it was, continue that, and maybe even find ways to strengthen it during this time if we can. Having distance learning occur at the end of the year will be quite different than starting the year. Yes, it sure will. And I'm wondering about that a little bit because I think some systems are going to look at this as sort of like a do-over. Okay, we made it to the end of the year. Now let's do this over and do this a little bit different and maybe make some improvements. I would caution people not to jump too far into a new realm because you want to bank on what people's experience was so you can leverage that for learning a few new things at a time. Jumping into something completely different after this experience is probably going to be another bit of struggle time, I think, for sure. Let me throw in, Chuck's got a few more here I want to throw in to the window here. And this is great. We're getting some really good feedback here. Adrian put in there, teachers really need to get serious about getting and keeping the students engaged. Yes, that's engagement is very important. And I shared a little story, I think maybe last week or the week before, about a student telling me that the math lesson was going on for 50 minutes, a video, and it's just really hard for kids to sit there for that kind of time and not have some sort of interaction and just sitting there and sort of watching, and you're expecting them to take notes. I think that engagement has to be done in a thoughtful way, and you're chunking this out and you're bringing it into little sections so they can consume 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes at a time. Very important to do that. Schools Beyond Walls in DC uses museums. Very good. Yes, I've seen actually a couple of schools that, some schools have actually partnered with museums, and their school is in the museum building, a certain wing of it or a part of it. And I think that's really an interesting approach. I think that gets them immersed in it in a way of that is hard to do in a regular classroom for sure. Delivery and exchange, I think Chuck put this one in here as well. What can be learned from homeschool platforms and families? Yeah, I think homeschooling has been doing some of this for a while. You have, I think higher education has been doing online learning in a more thorough way than K-12 historically for a while. I think we have some experience. I think we now need to gather up that data and pay a little closer attention to it now that so many more of us are having to do this. So many more of us are having to get kind of connected into how do we do remote learning, how do we do blended learning, how do we do completely online learning, and what those differences are with each one of them. Let's see, Stacy, you put it, this is going to blow my mind. Let's look at it here. Assessing effectively to determine true level of mastery. Yeah, how do you assess kids? I mean, this has been a real game in some places, trying to figure out how to end up the year with grades and things like that. And you're talking about assessments and trying to know how are they learning in this distance that we have between us that I can tell. I can't gauge their everyday classroom behavior because that's not possible. And I think this is where some shift maybe towards some mastery learning, looking at demonstrated proficiency in new and innovative ways versus a multiple choice test, or a traditional standardized test. They may still have their place for things, but I think teachers are going to have to really look at this assessment as a way to find out a little bit more about their students in new ways. Yes, okay, good. Posted the Padlet link there again. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. And let's see, parents. Oh yes, will parents still be as involved? Dina said this, will parents still be as involved in the education, or will they be happy to have the teachers back? Well, now, just from my experience and talking to really hundreds and hundreds of parents over the years, they love the first day of school because they bring them to that open house. They say, all right, yes, you have them back now. And, because they were, you know, had been through the break or the summer or what have you. I think there's some real positives about if there's ways to bring them back together. One, for the kids, because they enjoy being around their friends. That socialization is very important, being around your peers. I think parents, as their dynamic changes and shifts with this, and some of them actually going back from work, some may now work from home, some are trying to find that employment because of what they did before, you know, ended their job. So as these things change around, how they can help those kids at home is going to shift with it. That's where that flexibility has to come in. I think we have to understand that some people are not going to be able to continue to do a lot of support at home with their kids with learning as we get further along in this, as they have to take on new responsibilities and working and being outside the home now. I put one thing there under roles and responsibilities. This is real important to me just because it's dealing with the administrative part, the management part of education, is this shift of kind of what do you have to do day to day. Teachers, we've seen it. You know, they're you know, having to adjust to kind of doing everything from the computer screen. You know, doing their lesson, presenting, communicating, posting assignments, collecting assignments. Now with administrators, well, what do they need to do? And I just stress. You've got to be active in the learning environment that exists for your students. That means visiting those online courses and checking to see how things are going. And just making a point of where you would walk around the hallways of the school before, you're going to walk through all the courses and check in and just sort of see how things are going. And soliciting feedback where you can to see how people are feeling about the learning, I think is quite important. Let's scroll around here. Let's see, how can substitute teachers support online teaching and learning? Yeah, I I think it's kind of interesting to think about when, you know, if you're sick and you're going to work, you call in sick and somebody has a sub come in or what have you to take over those responsibilities from the sub lesson plan. What is that going to look like now? How can anybody subbing in for a teacher, you know, even if somebody coming to the house to help out, what ways could they really help support that learning? I think is a thought to put in there. Let's see. And homeschool platforms, yes. We've got some really nice things here. The digital tools, I wanted to talk about that just for a moment. I think each of you, you know, in your situations should reflect on the tools that are used now. How are those tools supporting what's going on? Are they faring okay? In some cases, a lot of tools have become free and are not costing anybody any money in terms of school systems. But what happens 3 months, 6 months from now when they say, okay, we're ending that free part. If you'd like to continue using this, pay whatever the subscription is. I think it makes it tricky for budgeting purposes, but it's worth investigating just a bit when you're trying to decide, hey, when we open up school, when we open the doors this next year, how are we going to, what are we going to offer to them? Are we going to use those same tools, or, you know, do we need to pare that down to just a few? And I think always going back to the user experience, get in their shoes, think about what they're having to do. And why I would promote something like a learning management system, if at all possible, is it really gives a lot of tools all in one place. So a parent logging in or a student logging in goes to one place, and they're grabbing a hold of you know, the information they need, going to the course they need, getting the documents, the readings, watching the lectures, using the third-party tools. And I think the ingenuity or the innovation that actually could happen here is kind of exciting to me, what people are going to come up with. Other ideas that people have, let's see. Yvonne put in, during this time of our sheltering in place, our internet went out. If I were teaching a class, I would have no way of letting my students know. That is right. And that's right. That presents some challenges for sure. And you would have to look at a situation where, how do you prepare ahead of time for that? How do you let people know, hey, if I'm not on at that particular time and something's happened to my internet, then here's what I'll do. And that's where, if you have some sort of remind system, and there is Remind, and then there's other ones out there that can send out, you know, notifications or quick messages. Sometimes that's helpful. One thing that you could look at if you're using an LMS is to enroll several teachers into any course. And maybe I'm enrolled in 5 extra courses, but I know I'm in those 5 extra courses because if for some reason that teacher can't get in, or they're having trouble, text me, call me, I go in there and post an announcement, hey, the teacher's having trouble getting in right now, please check back in an hour. So thinking about the way to communicate that and keep communicating even when someone's losing that connectivity. Because I know even at my house at times it's a little bit sketchy, kind of comes and goes a bit, and that can happen. And let's see, Chris, can't get Padlet to activate on my MacBook. Via the web, it should work going to that link, I think. I'm on a Mac, a MacBook, and I don't know, give the link a try. If not, then plop in another question. Let me see if we can, perhaps Lori might be able to look at it and see if there's an issue. But I think the link there is doing well right now, still working for us. And let's see what else we have dropped in here. Okay. Anyone else have any comments or want to share anything just by clicking on the microphone and expand on any of the things they posted here that maybe I didn't do the best job explaining? All right, just let me know. You can post in there if you want to do that. And there was one question here on the screen. Who plays what role in at-home learning to provide a quality and extended learning experience? I think this brings to mind several stories that I've heard about the quality, and especially in situations where people are paying for education. If you're talking about college, higher ed, is the experience that they're having, what's the quality there compared to what they were having before? And there'll have to be some sort of, I guess, discovery of what that's going to mean as we look towards, especially private schools and things like that, where you're paying for an education, but now you're paying for essentially that online education. is that what you want your money to go for? Or in some cases, you know, jobs have disappeared and that money's not available, so you're looking for something else. And let's see, Chuck has another one here. I'm going to plop that in here, Chuck. And I'm going to try and put this, well, I'll put it down here at the bottom. What are some best practices we can implement to support summer learning? Well, and some of you may have, and Erica, I'll get to you in just a moment. You have a question to pose to everybody. I'll bring you on in just a second. You know, one of the things with summer that I've tried to facilitate in schools in the past is the use of online library systems to give kids access to books and things, using Overdrive or Sora as is now known, to be able to keep reading going on, keep summer activities going on. And I think as we look at this school year coming up, some schools said we're going to start back earlier than normal because we're going to try and make up for some lost time in learning. I think bridging that summer is a question people are looking at now. How do we ensure students were where we needed them to be by the end of this year at the conclusion of that summer so that they're ready for next year? I think it is very, very critical question to look at with your institution and how you're bridging that gap. And Erica, if you want to unmute I think you can unmute yourself. Just type in there. If you can't do that, I think I've got it set to where you can.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, go ahead with your
Hi.
question.
So I think I've been coming to all of these. I might be the only museum educator who's coming to them, but I found them very helpful. So we're in a really interesting situation. Obviously, it's a challenging situation, but it has brought up a lot of positive things too.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's hard. Our in-person tours, like we can't do those anymore. Our summer camps, I'm doing them virtually now. But one of the benefits we have now is that I'm from Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska. And so I'm in like the most eastern part of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so kids can be 9-10 hours away from me and have no opportunity to go to the museum. Mm-hmm. But now we have this chance for kids from all over the state to be able to experience the museum, which is really beneficial, and we want to take advantage of it. So to some of you who are teachers, what is the best way for us to serve you? How can we best serve you? How can we best create a program that would fit in with what you do? Is it a Zoom session? Is it something online? We've experimented with so many things. We have this history learning toolkit, which is basically some videos with worksheets, vocabulary resources that teachers can use in the classroom. And then like we have these summer camps, which are about a 30-minute Zoom session. And then I send out an activity for the kids to do at home with their family. So what do you guys think about how museum educators can support you during this time period?
Yeah, if people have ideas and can help Erica out here, type your ideas there in the chat box, and you know, maybe we'll have some thoughts there. I think you know, from my vantage point, when I would look at, okay, I want to get the kids out to experience what the museum has to offer, would be to, you know, get into contact, first of all, with someone like yourself and say, okay, what do y'all have? What sort of things can you do? And it sounds like you've got sort of a collection of things that could be, you know, done right away. Personally, I think having a live video session with you, with the students, to, hey, everybody, if you can, we're going to take a trip to the, you know, field trip to this museum, you know, jump on it this time, and you'll be able to ask the curator, the leader of the museum, you know, these questions, and we can learn about X, Y, and Z. And you know, a lot of that experience I think could still happen, and you know, questions could be fielded, and that experience could be done. The other thing I would also think about, and I was listening on a meeting the other day, and this idea of science and how do you get kids to do some science at home. Could, you know, we send home rotating through like little science kits that would have that experiment or a certain experiment that they would send with the kids to use, and you know, then you know, clean them up and then send them out so different kids could experiment with them. You know, part of history is really trying to get that hands-on, you know, if you're going to a site, going to, you know, what does that artifact really look like, feel like, you know, in its 3D sense. Finding ways to explore that and to offer that to families, I think is you know, like a museum in a box. Here's some things, and here's what you can learn about these things. So that's just me thinking that may be wildly impractical, but it also just might be an idea. And let's see, virtual tours of museums. That's something that has been mentioned there. And let's see, history of Nebraska, very good. Oh, thanks, Erica, for dropping that in there, the link. That will be great for people to take a look at that. And there's a couple of questions. Chris posted, you know, teaching a correctional facility, loading videos and ancillaries onto tablets would be great. How about partnering with tech providers? Okay, that's a possibility there. Also, in the world of technology, you know, really putting together your own app, your own web app, your own experience that you could then, you know, push out to devices, to people is a way to sort of package what you have that you want to share out with other people. I think that's a venue worth exploring just a bit. And continue to post your ideas there for Erica. And then Chuck has a question. Chuck, I'm going to drop this over here into our world of Padlet real quick. Now that all teachers must have some online skills, what platforms have been useful for the low and high skilled pre-K-12 educators? Well, that's a big question. And I think that you have to, the way I look at it, you know, in the school system that I was working with, they were using Canvas, and, you know, they had pre-K teachers using Canvas. Now, I'll tell you, pre-K teachers were using Canvas, which pretty much was a single page landing page for their course, which was their pre-K class, that they put things that they were doing that week. Whereas you go to the opposite end of the spectrum when we're looking at 12th graders, and their teacher would have a daily agenda, and they'd have activities, they'd take tests, they'd get resources. So everyone was using a similar platform, but the depth and degree to which they were using the tools and things there really shifted. And I would say in general grew as, you know, the learner aged, so that there was more variety and more tools and more options that were leveraged for that learning. And all those require skills. And certainly, I know the pre-K-5 program, when it all shifted to online, they kind of collectively decided, hey, you know what? A lot of us know how to use Nearpod, and we also know how to use Explain Everything. Let's really help one another and focus on those two tools and how we can use those to help teach our kids remotely, using, you know, Canvas as kind of the learning portal. So I think those sort of conversations are important to have with the staff to see what do they need, and then tailor out that professional development. Chris mentioned virtual museum tours as videos be great. The other thing that can be done, and I don't know, Erica, and I haven't gone to your site right now, but I'm going to check it out. If, let's say in the museum, if you had a hall that had different exhibits on it, you know what, take a 3D camera and you make a 3D shot, and you can put in a 3D image, and they can kind of navigate around, and you put hot spots in it. It can play a video about that exhibit or tell you a little bit more. I mean, there's tools out there that sort of thing can be done relatively quickly and easily now. so that they kind of have that experience that they're in the museum still, and they choose and they can kind of navigate, walk around, take their museum walk, but they're doing it virtually kind of in that 3D environment. That I think has gone over well in some locations with museums wanting to bring that about. Let's see. Got a few other things here. Checking just my board here, scrolling around. And let's see. What do you feel, in your opinion, are some of the best digital tools that can help keep the students engaged, keep them focused, and increase their motivation and understanding? Well, I'll first tell you that any tool you select, try to choose one that's going to facilitate feedback back to the student. Getting feedback more than just a grade, yes, you did it, complete, incomplete, what have you. If you're giving specific feedback and can do that for your learners, then it draws their attention into it, and it's a level of accountability, which I think is good. They know, oh yeah, they really want me to do this and to do that. Also, find ways that you can get the kids together to, do some interactions, do an interactive game, do a Kahoot, do something that's going to bring them all together. One student I was talking to said, yeah, it's been good. My teacher will start a Zoom meeting, and usually she says she'll start at 10 minutes before and then keeps it open for a little bit after, so that we can talk to one another a little bit and just have some conversations. And I think that's important, to, if they know they have that opportunity, that time, kind of pulling them along, to get the usual work done, so that they can also get to see and talk to their friends just a bit. And engagement, I think, is also very connected to the chunking of material. And I encourage people to look at, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 12 of content that you put together, and then you have your learner do something with it. So that they're engaged with that. A 50-minute running nonstop video is I just don't think is acceptable in most cases. And I think you have to find a way to break that up. If you have a video that's long, use Edpuzzle and drop in some check questions or something, just to keep them connected in with it a bit. I think is very, very important. So understanding is check. I mean, you've got to have a way to check to see that they know what you think they know after getting your content, using your content, doing the activities. Do they know it? And that can be done in a number of ways. Think about your learners. How can they provide you back something other than just a test question? Some written work, some creative writing, graphics, pictures, photographs of work or things they did, little short videos, audio messages. I mean, think of these ways you can get more of themselves into what they're turning in to you for that feedback. I think is important. Some good ideas here. Anyway, we've just got a few minutes here, and I do want to thank everybody for placing some things out here, because it starts you thinking. And I think in the coming weeks, we're all going to be faced with decisions we have to make, whether it's just for a classroom, just for a school, just for a school system, just for an entire group of learners. The way we're, Erica at the museum, how do I, keep our learning happening with the culture, the history of what we have to offer, and getting that to the kids and thinking of ways to do that. Very, very interested in what's going to be happening here in the coming months. I'm going to switch my source real quick here to, let's see if this happens. There we go. And just to let you know, I'll be placing it. I have to catch up. I need to put this episode up onto the website. I'll do that, and I'll place the video up there once it comes available, and put that there, as well as some of the links I talked about today. The Padlet page, I'm going to save that out, and I'll also place that on there. So there'll be I think I can get a PDF of that I'll place on there. So you won't have to worry. You can go back and visit that just a little bit and see what, what things you need to think about in your particular situation. If you ever need to reach out, because this will be the last one of this series that I'm doing for this conference, and I really appreciate Steve and the others there putting together the Learning Revolution series, and I think it's been valuable. But I'll be jumping back into some of the other things I've got to get my head wrapped around as I start to look forward to what's this next new year going to be like, and how do we have to prepare for it. Ever have any questions? You can catch me through my website there. You can also email me anytime is fine. And let's see, can you email? Okay. All right, just checking the chat here for anything. Good enough. Well, I will wrap things up, and I thank you all because you are all my special guests today to participate and put in some good ideas in the Padlet there. And enjoy the rest of this conference offerings that they have through this month. And be on the lookout for me as I continue to do work in education and technology specifically. And reach out if you need to. Have a great rest of your day, whether it's morning or afternoon or evening, and hope to see you in another venue at another time. Thank you.